Hey there, D&D enthusiasts. Ever fancy swapping your dungeons for speakeasies and your dragons for wise guy weasels? Welcome to the world of Zoom Mafia RPG, live on Kickstarter now. We're into the campaign, and it's not just a game, it's an experience where the Roaring Twenties meets the animal kingdom in a thrilling underworld saga. Join the family of backers who are already part of the exciting journey. With your help, we're bringing this unique tabletop RPG to life, exclusive tiers, immersive gameplay, and a story that'll have you hooked, all waiting for you. Don't miss your chance to be part of something extraordinary. Back Zoo Mafia RPG on Kickstarter today and help us make the game a roaring success. Zoo Mafia RPG, where cunning meets the Roaring Twenties. Back us now.
All right, back in the olden days, let me get my walker. And get over to the dice. We used to roll our stats, and you might roll them straight down, and then there's no picking, there's no adjusting. You roll 3 die 6. What you got was what you got. Hello and welcome to Nerdarchy. For nerds, by nerds. I'm Nerdarchy Steve, and today I'm joined by
Nerdarchy Ted. So let's go on to the D&D character workshop.
D&D ability scores. What do they mean?
So first up, we have to ask, what are the ability scores?
You got strength, dex, con, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. And if you're interested in any kind of like D&D lore, that's not actually the order the stats used to go in, right? It used to be strength, intelligence, dex.
It's changed a couple of times throughout the editions.
Yeah.
So I don't recollect how it was in first edition. And we've been playing this style for so long, where we have the separation between physicals and mentals. So
they used to be mixed together.
Yes, they absolutely did.
Charisma's always been last, and strength has always been first.
But after that, other than that, they've been mished and moshed around a little.
All right, so what do the stats mean?
It's very, very simple. Strength is how physically strong you are, whether it be how much you lift, how hard you can punch. Anything that is literal brute force is going to be your strength. Dexterity is your precision, how agile you are, how nimble on your feet you might be. Constitution is how hardy are you, whether it be resisting damage, resisting disease, or anything along those lines. Your physical fortitude, if you will, is your constitution.
You also have your intelligence, which is basically your raw IQ, your ability to learn, kind of, your mental acuity. And then you have wisdom, which sometimes intelligence and wisdom get a little confused, but wisdom really is your ability to perceive the world around you and how intuitive you are, and it could also be your willpower.
And last but certainly not least is your charisma, which this one throughout the editions has had a little bit of, twists and change along to it. When I first started playing, it was described to me as that's just how attractive you are. And it's really mucked with a lot of players throughout the editions, because I don't want to be an ugly adventurer. Now it has more along the idea of your personal presence, your personal power within, if you will, correlates to sorcerers and bards and that kind of stuff. But how confident you are. If you were to get up on stage, how likable would you be? So your ability to persuade people, to lie, all of these things that go with your overall confidence and power.
That, and that pretty much, sums them up. And like you said, charisma has kind of been the wonky one, where it's like, oh, how attractive you are. But it's less about physical appearance and more about, how people respond when you enter the room and when you interact with people.
Because we've all seen the people who are considered, oh, they are attractive. But there are times that somebody who is not as good looking walks into a room, but all eyes just immediately lock onto them and lock onto their presence. There's something about them that just draws you in.
The it factor. I like to just call it the it factor.
Sure. So those people with high charisma have it.
All right, Ted, tell me why you think ability scores are important to your character.
Ability scores are important because they really are the building blocks for who your character is. Where you have your higher stats determine in what kind of areas might you excel. It also tells you the opposite. If you have low stats in something, it's going to say all right, what are your fallacies? What are your weaknesses that you can kind of play into? And you've got the ability that when you're making your overall story to build those advantages and weaknesses into who this character is before you start rolling dice and before you start roleplay.
Yeah, I would even say that it's like the raw mechanical essence or building blocks of your character, right? And how mechanically you're going to interact with the world around you.
Completely. But so you can build these characters out, you can build your story off of these things using those building blocks.
All right, there's a couple areas we're going to delve into now. One is min-maxing. The other is how you generate your stats. And then also like kind of the difference between like maxing out, having flaws, or having more of a medium array of stats.
So min-maxing is a way to get the most out of your character mechanically. It is a term that is used for when you want to make the most powerful character of a particular type. If you're taking fighter and you're making him strength based, it's like, all right, well, I need to make sure I'm choosing a build that gets me the most amount of strength for this character so that I can do the most amount of damage, or I can capitalize on particular abilities while I'm making them and making the most efficient character to do a particular task.
Right, like, the strength example, you're slathering on armor, so dex isn't going to matter as much for your armor class. It still has other factors in the game because it's one of the most important stats in the game, unfortunately. It is very weighted. But going the other way, like if you go with a dex heavy fighter, you're like, oh, well, I'm not going to rely on armor as much as my dex, so you might get rid of your strength, right? Also, if you're a character that isn't going to be interacting with others, you might be like, well, I'm not going to be using charisma. I don't need that. I'm a barbarian. I break things. If I can't convince them with my words, I'm just going to smash my way through them anyway.
So you have the ability to look at the style of play that you're going to do, mechanically who your character is, and you want to make the most use of where you place your stats if you're looking to min-max.
Yeah, like if you're a spellcaster, you might be like, well, I'm not going to physically interact with the world. That's what magic's for, right? So you may focus more on your mental stats.
When you're choosing your stats, you have the standard array and you have the point buy system that 5th edition has. The standard array is a 15, 14, 13, 12, 10, and 8, and you get to place them any way you choose within your stat blocks before you begin applying any racial modifiers or species modifiers, as I believe they're trying to call them now. Point buy system has a breakdown, and you can literally say, I'm going to buy whatever stats I want, but you only have so many points to play. So if you want 3 14s and 3 8s, you can do that. Or if you want a mixture of 12s and 13s so that you've got no dump stat and you've got pluses to everything, you can do that too. So with the point buy, you can get the split. You can do 3 15s and 3 8s. Just use your points wisely, because after you're done placing your stats, like you can't save those points for other things and whatnot. So.
Oh wait, there's another way.
All right, what's that, Dave?
All right, back in the olden days, let me get my walker. And get over to the dice. We used to roll our stats, and you might roll them straight down, and then there's no picking, there's no adjusting. You roll 3 die 6. What you got was what you got. Maybe you ended up with a high strength and a high charisma, and everything else sucked. Maybe all your scores sucked. Some DMs were generous, and they had the commoner rule. If your stats were as bad as a commoner or worse, you could kill that character and make a new one basically before it ever left the creation. But then there's also, you could roll them, put them where you want. The most widely accepted dice rolling method is 4d6, drop the lowest, place them where you want. But I've seen all kinds of stuff. There's all kinds of things that you could do, and by manipulating the dice method will determine how powerful your characters are. And going back to the point buy, you could do the same thing. There's not a lot of benefit to that in 5e because you max out at a 20, which is worth mentioning as well, which we haven't. Mm-hmm. Generally your low score, unless something really, really bad happens, is going to be a 3 in the game. You can't really be below that. But you also can't get above a 20, and generally you can't start with a stat that high. Now, rolling you might be able to. If you get a +2 to a stat, you have an 18, then you can get the 20. But you literally have nowhere else to go with that stat from that point on, with some very rare exceptions in the game.
Right, and rolling is the only way to get that 18, because the point buy and the standard array standardly don't allow you to get that. Now, if your DM happens to be doing something different, well then sure, but in the book, the point buy doesn't have anything to offer beyond a 15. So you couldn't even buy that even if you were given more points to play with.
Yeah, it just means you could have more higher stats
Right.
and less lower stats. So now let's look at the difference between dumb stats, excellent stats, and medium stats.
So anything that would be essentially be a 14 or better, so it's a +2 modifier to everything you're doing, is considered, excellent or superb, if you will. Anything that is essentially below a 0 winds up becoming a dumb stat, because at an 8 or a 9, you're at a -1 on everything that you attempt to do. Generally accepted throughout many editions of D&D, commoners, the average people, have a 10 or an 11 in a stat, which is no modifier in the current edition, which literally means it just comes down to the roll of a d20 on any attempt that they would do at a task.
Now, currently in the game, basically you get 3+1s where you can put where you want them. You could put 2 of them in the same score. You cannot put 3 of them in the same score to start off with. Now, before that, you would select a race, and it used to be that race would determine where your stat increases were. So that's where the medium stats really came into play a lot for me. It's like, well, you're not really going to excel at this particular thing. If you're playing an intelligence-based character, but the race you're playing is just naturally very strong and it's a +2 to that stat, you might go, well, I'm just going to put my dump stat in there, giving you no penalties, and you're weak for that race, but you're average. But you're not going to start off with that 16 in one of the stats that you want to be exceptional, like intelligence, because you don't get the bonus there. But that's the olden days. We don't do it that way anymore, though you could if you wanted to. Or you could still use that same methodology where it's like, well, I'm not going to be superb or excellent at everything, but I'm going to be okay at everything. I'm not going to have any minuses to my character, which, and when we first started playing 5e, it was kind of interesting that, like, oh, everyone has a dump stat. Everyone has, like, a flaw. But then, like, once everyone does it, it became less interesting to me. I know some players are like, well, this is great. Like, this defines your character better. But I'm like, when every character is defined that way, to me, it's less unique. Actually, the unique thing became, to me, was to actually go with the medium stats, not having that excellent stat and not having that dump stat. That actually became the more original thing.
Right. And every play style is valid. You have to figure out for your table, for your play, is literally 1 point going to make a difference early game that you will have if you play a long protracted game, you're going to have the ability to mitigate that and round that out, because like Dave says, once play starts happening, until you get to like massive end game with items and a couple class features, nothing is going to take your stats above a 20. So you'll play catch up over the course of play. So by 4th or 8th level, you're going to be catching up to everybody else. Maybe 12th if you do something a little bit wonky. But you've got the way to be there at the end where everybody's tied anyway.
That is the truth. Although I will say the game itself kind of rewards those players that min-max their stats and use dump stats and superb stats. Because there is certain points where that extra point does make a difference, especially earlier on in the game. But you know what? It's a role-playing game. You can play it however you want. You can put your stats however you want. Whatever is fun for you.
I mean, it literally comes down to a 5% difference on the d20 roll of whether your attack hits or whether the opponent passes their saving throw, depending upon what things you look at. But when you choose to go with, the dump stat and have that negative, if you've got an intelligent DM, they know where your weakness is. Oh, you dumped intelligence and you're playing a barbarian type. All right, you don't have proficiency in intelligence saving throws, and you've got a -1. All right, well, it looks like my spellcaster is going to attack you with psychic damage that you're not resistant to, and you're going to most likely fail an intelligence-based saving throw. So there's always going to be caveats when you start looking at min-maxing.
Damage is the least you worry as a barbarian, and more of the worry for your party is being mind controlled.
I was gonna lead into that as well, but it's a scenario that I was just kind of layering it out there that when you min-max, you create strengths that you're great at, but there's those, mins, and that's a weakness.
What about beyond the numbers, though? Like, we talked a lot about mechanics and the numbers. What is something else we can look at these ability scores and these stats for and use them for in a role-playing game?
Absolutely. Well, to keep going with our barbarian trend, the characters who are strong, well, what did you do to achieve that strength? Do you have some kind of lineage that is something important? Did you just saw lumber or, cut down trees?
Were you Conan pushing the wheel for basically all of your childhood?
So if you figure out where these figures come from, like what made you excel at whatever you chose your stat to be, what is the reason of why you have a dump stat. I once played a paladin where I dumped my dexterity. Well, I had him when he was young. He was a tiefling. He got attacked for being a tiefling because he's fiendish, therefore they broke his ankle and it didn't set right. So he walked with a limp the entire, for the rest of his life. And, it was a challenge dumping, as Dave says, one of the most important stats in the game, but it gave this character something fun to play with and, some story element that would carry through the entire campaign.
Yeah, you look at your stats and go, hey, why is this a dump stat? What happened with this character to make it so low? If it's constitution or strength, was there a childhood illness that they never completely recovered from? If it's intelligence, do they have some kind of learning disability? I love playing characters that aren't that smart.
Kicked in the head by a mule.
Kicked it, maybe, could have been. But, what is it? If your character has dumped wisdom, what does that mean? Are they just gullible and they believe everything? Or do they just not pay attention? They live in their own world. They're just oblivious to what's going on around them. If charisma is your dumb stat, why do people not like you? Because it's your likability, right? Mm-hmm. Why it's the it factor and you don't have it. Why? The opposite of that is if those are your superb stats, why are they the superb? And that's kind of what you were talking about. So think about your stats and how they define your character and how your character is going to interact with the world around you.
Do you live in those moments that you excel, or are they things that you despise? That it factor. If you are incredibly drawn, or if people are incredibly drawn to you, does it become tiresome when you walk into a room and everybody has to see what you're doing? It's like, oh God, not again. Or is it something that you're like, nope, I love the spotlight. You walk into a room and you delight in the eyes on you. If you're super strong, and you go to a tavern, are you the one always looking to be like, all right, who's the strongest here? Who can I beat in an arm wrestling contest? You have these things that you can have as these defining moments for your character and for how you're going to role play them as well.
A perfect example is there's a lot of times where there's the smartest person in the room that no one will listen to because they're not very charismatic. But they'll listen to the dope that is very charismatic and is just talking out their behind and has no idea what they're talking about. But so I want to ask you folks, what is your favorite stat of excellence? What is your favorite dump stat? Let us know down in the comments below.
Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, even go ahead and attune to that notification bell.
Don't forget we drop regular videos here on the channel, so come on back. And if you need something else to watch, check the card up here.
So until next time, stay nerdy.